Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Divided Films, the podcast where we talk about movies that audiences and critics do not agree on. My co-host Keith is with me as always.
Hello!
Keith, we're recording this before the Oscars, but we will be releasing this afterwards. So, we're just anticipating these Academy Awards. Again, at the time of this recording, it'll be this Sunday, but looking forward to also discussing the results afterwards and seeing which we agree and disagree with. How about you? Are you excited?
I am. I actually, if I could promote I was a recent guest on one of our guests, Johnny Della Luna's podcast, The Winning Ticket, and I actually got to explore the betting side of the Oscars, but I came at it with I have seen 95% of the nominees. I think there's always one or two movies that just are hard to see, but I always like the awards. And I think if the Oscars decide to do things a little differently this year, it could be a memorable one, or it could just be an ordinary, regular, meandering one.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I think last year there was more of a case of people not having seen most of the nominations, where this year I think feels a little more normal, like a pre-COVID theatrical year. So I know, too, you're also one who is usually ahead of the curve in terms of seeing all the nominees, knowing which ones are most likely to win. Because for me, I've seen maybe like a handful. I'm behind. I usually catch up after the awards, and I might learn about more movies than I was aware of just from watching the ceremony. So we'll see. We'll catch up and maybe have an analysis afterwards. But we're talking about one of the nominees today, and that is Licorice Pizza. This movie falls into the category of having a positive score from critics and a mixed score from audiences. So on Rotten Tomatoes, 91% of critics approve. So very, very positive on that end, but only 65% of audiences approved. So very mixed with that group. And the consensuses, because we have both critics and audience consensus. Critics say Licorice Pizza finds Paul Thomas Anderson shifting into a surprisingly comfortable gear and getting potentially star-making performances out of his fresh-faced leads. But the audiences say that Licorice Pizza might make you nostalgic for your own youth if you don't mind drifting through what passes for its plot, that is. So right off the bat, I think with what a lot of audiences are coming from is the so-called plot, which maybe you could make an argument that there isn't much of a plot to Licorice Pizza. But then again, if you're a fan of Paul Thomas Anderson, you might be more used to looser plot structures and more into these dives into people's lives, into specific periods of time and places. That's just right off the bat. That's the feeling I had watching this, that the average moviegoer who's used to more plot-driven narratives, this is definitely something different than what they'd be used to. But again, if you're well-versed in Paul Thomas Anderson's work, this is something that you might be more expecting.
I'm kind of surprised. I'm very surprised, but also the more I read the audience reviews, the more I'm like, I always have to forget that Paul Thomas Anderson is not as popular. He has made like mainstream movies, but he's not Tarantino. And I would put them in the same category for me, because when either of them or a director in that vein puts out a movie, it's like getting a new vinyl. Oh my God. It's like going to the music store and getting a new vinyl from your favorite band. Paul Thomas Anderson is one of my favorite filmmakers, if not like he's in my top 3. He just, the way he writes, the way he directs, I love following his journey. That doesn't mean I give A pluses to everything that he's done. Like, I don't think Licorice Pizza is my favorite film of his, but I showed this to my parents the other night, and we all found it charm. I like this. It was my second time seeing it, and it's charming. The writing is charming. You're able to look at it. He writes, like, even if you love like There Will Be Blood or Boogie Nights, he writes characters and scenes. It's like going from one scene to the next, and there is a plot happening. There is, or at least character development. They like you're seeing your first love in the San Fernando Valley in 1973, and you're seeing them get jealous. You're seeing them hate each other. You're seeing them kind of one loving each other at the wrong time. It's a nostalgic look, and he grew up in the San Fernando Valley, so it's very nostalgic for him. But it's definitely a throwback to like older films, the way it's shot.
I agree. It felt like a movie that could have been made and released in 1973. So it definitely felt very authentic, felt very personal. Reading through some of your notes and doing my own research, some of these stories within the movie are based on real experiences either he or someone else he knows has had. You get a sense that these are real personal experiences. And also for the time period, I do get a kick out of seeing some of these touchstones of the early 70s. Like when the Gary character is touring for a fictional version of Yours, Mine, and Ours. Under One Roof, I think, is the fictional version. It felt very much like what family movies were in the 70s. It was like a chitty chitty bang bang type musical, very cheesy, and just the look, feel, sound. I think he just really captured the setting perfectly, as he is to do with the rest of his films. So I really like that. And I think with a lot of his movies, like this is a good example where he creates the characters and then he puts them in various kinds of situations and vignettes throughout the whole film, but it's more character driven than plot driven, you could say. And yeah, there are certain moments that are more tense than others. Some are more lighthearted, but you're just seeing how these characters react to different situations and them grappling with their feelings for each other. So I think that's ultimately like the journey is an emotional one, maybe not necessarily, one particular objective happening in the film, but it's a journey of emotional growth and maturity. And so it's more subtle, and I enjoyed. It's a thinker. I think I need to see it again to really appreciate it.
Well, his movies, in my opinion, always get better with each viewing. I would say even I was confused the first time I saw Inherent Vice, and I think it's supposed to confuse you because it's written by Thomas Pynchon. There's a lot happening, but you're like the character is not focused on the plot, but then he jumps back in. It's a very interesting noir 70s tale, but you pick up on things with each view. It gets better with each viewing. I just rewatched The Master. I always love picking up on the character dynamics in that, and he has his things that he writes about, whether it's California, whether it's messed up relationships, i.e. like Punch Drunk Love, The Master, Phantom Thread. He has this unique way of writing, but the reason why I appreciate him is if a movie like this was plot driven, you don't wear the plot on a shirt. You think about the characters. And also, gotta give credit to both Cooper Hoffman and Alana Haim, who have never acted before, outside maybe a music video. And honestly, I think Alana should have been nominated for an Academy Award. I think Bradley Cooper should have been nominated for that short, memorable, amazing scene as John Peters.
You know what's so funny, though, is that the marketing of this movie, which maybe I feel like didn't know how exactly to market this film, they definitely overused Bradley Cooper in the trailers because he's not really in this movie for very long. He maybe has less than 10 minutes of screen time, which is fine. I don't mind that, but the trailers would have you believe that he's more prominent to the story, which he's not. I think that's just like, oh, like recognizable stars because our leads are new finds. So that's like a typical thing marketing will do to push forward the recognizable actors. But I like that you only see,
Oh, that makes sense.
You have your
yeah.
bit with Bradley Cooper, you have your bit, with these characters here and there. It's the focus is on the main two leads and different chapters with different groups of characters, which I like. You have your one saga with the waterbeds, which is also very 70s. I mean, I forgot waterbeds were even a thing. I think when I was a kid, I sat on a waterbed once, and that was it. Or the whole bit with the mayor, and I thought it was cool that they got one of the Safdie brothers in there.
Yeah, he's really becoming quite the actor. I've seen him in other stuff aside from his role in Good Time, but a lot of these are either real or were based off real people in that time.
Yeah, you could tell because it feels so organic. It doesn't feel like a contrived situation at all. I mean, there are certain things where there'll be like something that comes up and then you move on very quickly from it that, again, maybe think a lot about what was the purpose of that. And I feel like I had to lose that mentality of what's the purpose of this, what's the purpose of that, because that's not what this kind of film is, where every single thing is A to B to C to D. It's just moments in these people's lives. So like when he gets arrested, the Gary character gets arrested for murder. He's like mistakenly identified as a suspect, and then he's immediately released. It's like, well, what was that all about? But it does. It's part of the emotional journey between the two. Does it necessarily have anything like, is it super driven in that it has something to do with anything else in the story? No, but it doesn't have to. It's something you have to let go as a viewer from watching mainstream films.
Well, you kind of have to. Even it feels like you're listening to a 70s album, and Licorice Pizza is like a vine. It was the name of a record store, but it that's what a record is. But you kind of have to, I'm not going to say think a little too hard, but there is a lot going on underneath the surface with these characters. I mean, all these situations have happened. Like they're outlandish, but they're not implausible. Like like Gary Goetzman was a young child actor. He was in Yours, Mine, and Ours, and he did end up owning a pinball and waterbed store when he was very young. I found that very interesting.
And I thought it was interesting that pinball had been illegal in different parts of the country for a period of time. That's something I didn't know about.
It's like little fun facts about California at the time, and I just think like the fact. Like right before that, he was so jealous, rightly as every teen boy should be, that, when he goes to get hamburgers with his mom, he sees Alana out on a date and he calls. So they have this little flirtation at the expo, but she follows him to the to jail and tries to get, like, there's something,
yeah, exactly.
And I bet all the time she's asking herself, why am I doing this? This kid is 15. I mean, and we'll get it. I'm sure we'll get into that because that was also in the audience reviews. But I always saw the uniqueness about this relationship, and it's about a kid who is trying to grow up way too fast, and a girl who's stuck in Arrested Development, who's quite not ready to grow up because she's acting like a teenager even when she gets home and yells at her sisters, yells at her family. And he's hustling and buying businesses. It's so interesting.
So how'd you become such a hotshot actor?
I'm a showman. It's my calling. I don't know how to do anything else. It's what I'm meant to do. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I've been a song and dance man.
Come on. Ever since you were a kid. Song and dance man. Where are your parents?
My mom works for me.
Oh, of course she does.
Yes, she does,
That
in my
makes
public
sense.
relations company.
In your public relations company? Because you have that.
Yes.
And you're an actor.
Yes.
And you're a secret agent, too.
Well, no, I'm not a secret agent. That's funny.
Yeah, it's like every one of those moments or chapters, it centers around what their emotional takeaway is. So for me, like the Alana character, she's really going back and forth and grappling with wanting to be more mature and wanting to get on with an adult life, but then also this newfound affection and eventual love she has for a 15-year-old. And like you can maybe on paper that's neither here nor there, but you can see her grappling with that in every single scene, right? Like the one really tense scene that I thought was signature P.T. Anderson was the truck rolling down the hill.
Oh my god, that was amazing.
Because that was so good, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of the one scene in Boogie Nights with
Alfred Molina, also one of my favorite
Alfred
scenes in movie history.
Just in terms of having a very tense situation that you're just on the edge of your seat, which stands out from the rest of the movie, at least in this film, that you don't really have that kind of tension throughout the rest. But the takeaway from that at the end is she's really shooken up by that, like any grown adult would be. But this kid, his brothers are high-fiving each other. They're pumped up, and that's like a real turning point for her, because after that you really see her try to pull away from him.
Yes,
and move to that again. Like every single part of this movie, you could say, well, where's the story going? It's the emotional journey, like seeing how their attitudes towards each other evolve in a very natural and I think believable way.
That's I think what's important to the age aspect. Like she's not jumping on him, and he it's mild flirtation in the beginning, and based on a experience that Paul Thomas Anderson's, like the idea that sparked it, a young high school kid hitting on a woman in her 20s, and he asked her out and she calls him, like what happens if he asked her out and she calls him on his bluff? That was like the what if origin of the idea. But
right, that opening scene is the recreation of him witnessing that, and then everything after that is of his own invention, which I like that. I think I got a sense of that too, that opening scene of them meeting, him bugging her, I did get a sense that was something he had observed, and now he is taking us into his own imagination of where that would have gone.
But just little 2 points about like the whole age thing, because I think if you don't like it, you don't like it. But critics and audiences loved Harold and Maude, and that is an age difference right there. So don't,
good point.
I'm calling some people out on that. And with the emotional, like she meets all types of men throughout the movie, from the Gary's co-star to Sean Penn's William Holden's character to Bradley Cooper, who flirts with her during that tense scene. And to the mayor character, who is, she was seen as like the golden girl in his eyes, and he kind of turns out to be a justifiable jerk. I'll say that because I can totally empathize, but his beard, maybe I would say, at the situation says,
I was about to say, like, he saw her as the beard.
He says the theme when she takes his, I guess, ex-boyfriend home, because he says they're all shits. They're all shits. All those guys, we're all shits. But Gary is, and Gary's a shit too, but he's a little different. He's a little different. He gives Alana confidence.
Right, and that's the thing too. It doesn't matter how old some of these guys are. Some of them are more immature than Gary is.
Yeah.
Because then, you have Sean Penn's character. He's a fictional version of William Holden. I think what his name is Jack Holden in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's just funny that they had, like, there's a fictional version of Lucille Ball. They don't say she's Lucille Ball. It's Lucille Doolittle.
And yet they use real John Peters. And
right. Interesting choices there. But with the William Holden type character, he was insane. Some of the dialogue that she has with some of these other guys, like the Sean Penn character, it is really surreal. Because they are, I think my takeaway was that they just want to hear themselves talk, these guys, and they're going on, and yeah, they're interested in her on maybe a surface level, but they're not really interested in who she is or what she has to say. They just want to impress her or to validate their own idea of themselves, and it blows up in her face pretty much every time. So yeah, she falls off the motorbike, and who's there to her aid again is Gary. And the guy, I half expected when Sean Penn was jumping over the fire that he was gonna like crash into it or something. But it's not that kind of movie, right? Where someone's gonna get like killed or injured, or there's gonna be like an action type scene. Again, there's some tension there with the truck rolling down the hill, but for the most part, it's not the kind of movie where there's like a big moment of someone getting shot or killed. It's the focus is on their journey together on themselves. I'm glad the focus never gets taken away, and there's no jump the shark or jump the fire type.
No, I think Paul Thomas Anderson, I think no matter what genre he tackles, he does his best to really create standout characters, whether it's Daniel Plainview or Dirk Diggler. And he has tried different stuff as a filmmaker that you can, like in Magnolia, you can always respect the frogs raining down upon the sky. I know some critics had no idea what to make of that scene when that came out, but I think now he is, and this is his second rom-com, and even his first, Punch Drunk Love is like a weird rom-com in that it's like if one of Adam Sandler's characters was a real person. And
yeah, like take his Sandlerisms and filter it down to something that is more relatable, or at least
make
more
that into
tangible.
a mentally ill man who finds love. But this one is just, but this one falls into the rom-com category, and it just never, as insane as some of these scenarios get, it just never loses the focus of these characters just exploring first love. And I just found it charming. I know one movie that I would kind of compare it to, and I was shocked at the audience score on that, is and hear me out, folks, it's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Oh,
I will say that I definitely can see that connection. I even thought of that myself, because at the very least, I would say that if this gives you, if Licorice Pizza gives you a glimpse into 70s Hollywood, to an extent, I mean Valley / Hollywood, then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the era right before. So I actually was connecting the two in my head. So I'm glad that great minds do in fact.
I'm glad to know. I thought you were going to say you're crazy. You're out of here. That's it.
Podcast over.
But they're both hangout movies. Like nothing really, aside from the ending of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you're really kind of basting in the stew that Tarantino set for himself. You're hanging out on set. You're hanging out with Brad Pitt. You're really just following Margot Robbie just throughout as she goes to see a movie. I'm forgetting the actor, Sharon Tate. You're really just following a day in the life.
I like that.
Like that was also one of my favorite movies of 2019, and the more I watch it, I think it's becoming one of my favorite movies. It's getting up there, but the audience, that is a 70% audience score, and I'm like, what? Am I losing? And I don't want to be hard on audiences, but I love the fact that these movies exist, and if you have good written characters, it's like the Sunny Gang. I could watch the Sunny Gang go anywhere. Like I don't need they don't need a plot. They just need like a prompt. So that's it, because they're well written characters, and that's one of Paul Thomas Anderson's specialty. And
Well, yeah, because in both Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and this, it's more about exploring the world at not at a slow pace, but just not at a rushed pace. Like you can really, like you said, bask in those worlds, in that setting, and just see what life was like. And that really is something I enjoy in a lot of period pieces. Just what was day-to-day life like back then? How did people carry on their business? What upset people? What interested people? What was the context for things that we know, like the gas crisis? They bring that up, and again, it's in the
My parents remembered that. Like,
yeah, my parents probably did too. It's one of those things where it's almost like also like Mad Men, for example. We know from our own perspective, many decades later, these big historical events, but what was it like in the actual context with characters that we've now come to know who are part of that world? So in that sense, I enjoyed taking my time with that world and seeing different parts of it. And yeah, with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, unfortunately, there's a preconceived idea of what Tarantino's movies are like because so many previous ones are so action packed that if he does want to take his time, then that's just not what his viewers or his what some fans come to expect. But I think in actuality, really big like hardcore Tarantino fans would actually love it because they get more of his dialogue and character study that he was known for in his earlier works. So again, not to like bash on like casual audiences, but it's sometimes something that they are forced to buy into, or at least something that they're marketed to is, oh, like this is a work, this is something or a genre you like or an auteur that you like. Well, this is how we're going to package them for all these things that they've done before. So when they do something different, they don't really expect anything else.
yeah.
Because that's another thing. Paul Thomas Anderson, you mentioned before, he's not like a mainstream director per se. He is an auteur like a Tarantino. He's like a filmography guy that you'll have your day with and you'll explore and you'll say, this is my favorite of his, this is my least favorite. He has that name brand recognition, which is why he's able to make a movie like this that doesn't star two already established actors. He can find two actors and discover them and write a movie that is paced much differently than other movies that are being released right now.
Yeah, I kind of like put him in the camp as like there's ways I compare him to Tarantino, but I would put him more in the camp of like the Coen brothers, where it's like they're not very niche, but they're pretty niche in their movie and their filmmaking and their fans, and every once in a while they have a hit. And I'm not talking about a cult hit. I'm talking about like a critical hit, because Lebowski kind of grew from a fan base, but it took them a while. Like, Fargo, No Country for Old Men. I'll even put True Grit up there. But now they're making their movies on Apple Plus and Netflix. Paul Thomas Anderson had there's a lot of people. Whenever I'm talking to just people about movies and favorite filmmakers and stuff, a lot of people have not seen Paul Thomas Anderson's movies, except maybe There Will Be Blood, and maybe they just saw it way back when in 2008 or 9 when it came out. They remember his performance.
Right. I mean, I think one of the reasons is that his movies all very look differently because they always take place. He's made a few other movies that took place in the 70s, Boogie Nights or Inherent Vice, but yeah, like There Will Be Blood is such a different movie than the rest of his catalog, and you could say the same thing maybe about Magnolia or Phantom Thread. He just there's a feel and a look that's totally different, and I like that about him too. But I feel like it's not like Tarantino that all of his movies have a certain feel to it, like they're all part of maybe the same world. I think he is Paul Thomas Anderson's a very diverse director, and so it's hard to exactly pin down on the surface, at least, what makes a movie that you can say, oh, that's Paul Thomas Anderson. But when you do watch all his films, then you actually can connect it. It's a little more nuanced.
Why would you do that? Why would you do that? He was maybe going to be my boyfriend.
Listen, young lady, you don't bring this idiot to Shabbat dinner here.
Listen, Dad, he's an atheist and an actor, and he's famous.
But he's Jewish.
He was going to take me out of here. Essie, don't you even look at me. Don't you even look at me. You're always looking at me. What are you doing?
I didn't even say anything.
What are you doing? What are you thinking, huh? I'm Essie. I work for Mom and Dad. I'm perfect. I'm a real estate agent. Alana doesn't have her life together. Alana brings home stupid boyfriends all the time.
I mean,
I knew it. I knew that was what you were thinking. You're always thinking things, you thinker. You thinker. You think things.
I know I'm not the first person to say this, but he is my generation's, or maybe Gen X's, but he is my generation's Robert Altman. Because Robert Altman has been that kind of director. Maybe like he did the movie version of MASH, I should say. He did Gosford Park. He did The Player, and a lot of those are vignettes, like scenes leading up to maybe MASH. The movie ends in like a 20-minute football game in the Korean War, but it's a lot of vignettes with the string of a plot. And Robert Altman has got his accolades and nominations, but has also been very niche for a mainstream crowd.
Yeah, I think you get a sense that Paul Thomas Anderson is influenced by directors of that time, and maybe if you ask him, he could say that Robert Altman is an influence too. But he seems to be like a director who who's done his homework, who's who's really knowledgeable of
very much so
film history, which is maybe why he draws on so many different time periods and genres. And he doesn't really make. If anything, I feel like he's made movies more often in the last 10 years or so, but he only makes usually a movie on average once every 4 or 5 years.
I would say 4, yeah.
And so I think because his last movie was
2017,
Thread,
yep.
right? And that was 2017. And for that, Inherent Vice. So I think he actually had more of a cluster between now and going back to There Will Be Blood, but there was a time where he was making only one, maybe only every 5 years or so, and so each one of his works stands out more in that, where it's like, oh, like here's another one, and it's easier, I think, once you know his work to differentiate them.
Yeah, this is his 9th feature, but he's
been making movies for like over 20 years. Yeah, like 25 years. It was his first film, I think.
His first film, I think it was before Boogie Nights. It was a film called Hard 8 with a very young John C. Reilly. But Boogie Nights for me is one of my all-time. If you want to get to know Keith, Boogie Nights is, to me, just why I love film, why I love every aspect of it is perfect, especially that Alfred Molina scene, which what it tries to do, it's so tense, and the music, everything just is, I love it.
That's what I'm saying. He can create these scenarios with like a pocket of the movie that has you really on edge. Like, not the whole movie will be this suspenseful, on your seat feel to it, but he can like put these characters in a scenario like that at any point in time in the story, and all of a sudden because at that point they've been so fleshed out, you get even more invested in how that plays out, and it has even more tension than a normal scene would.
I'm sure it's a hard sell to a lot of people, like Phantom Thread. It's like, okay, Daniel Day-Lewis as a dressmaker, The Master, like, okay, Joaquin Phoenix as a drunk and going into early Scientology in the 1950s. It might be a hard sell, and maybe I don't think I'm doing a good job selling it now, but the scripts are actually really funny. There's humor, like, especially with this script. This script is, not laugh a minute, but there are a lot of moments where you're cracking up, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I enjoyed the dynamic that Alana has with her family,
her real life
because
family.
I thought that was really nice that they got her actual family. because there are times that they are so baffled by her behavior, like when she comes home in the bikini, like, and they're like, what's going on? And she won't open the door when they knock on her bedroom. Things like that. The dad gets mad at the one boyfriend who says he's an atheist. I got a kick out of that.
Which actually happened. Alana, because Paul Thomas Anderson has filmed a number of Chaim's music videos, and they told him that story. He's like, I'm putting, like, that has to go into the script. It's such a oh no, I can't, I'm an atheist. I just think that's funny.
That was, I mean, it was also tense too, I think, that scene as well, because clearly the dad is not going to take well to what this guy is saying, even though he's trying to be respectful about it. It's like, sorry, I like, what's more uncomfortable than that? It's like the early 70s too, and that wasn't even really much of a thing yet, like atheism, having to explain to like your girlfriend's family you don't believe in God, and that was a bit unnerving. And yeah, the charm too. I feel like with this director, he really dedicates himself to a specific tone. So this movie is like very, very charming. I feel like Boogie Nights is a very wild movie.
Yeah.
There Will Be Blood is a very gritty movie.
Haunting. I would say haunting.
Yes.
There's always a sense of something bad is going to happen, just like it did in that first scene when he falls and breaks his leg. There's always that sense of this evil, or I guess you could say, like, what he does is he's a pretty shitty human being, but there's always a sense of like he's going to set that world on fire, and he kind of does.
Right. It's very foreboding.
That's a great
almost
word.
Like what he's doing. He is very defined in what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of what's the word when you ruin the purity of something?
Tainted.
He is. Well, in that movie, it's like he's. It's gonna come to me like.
Like Inherent Vice is like it's like you smoked a lot of weed and you're still in the smoke. You're trying to figure out yourself through the haze.
It is a hazy movie for sure. And then, and then I feel like Phantom Thread is this very like, in that movie, it seems the whole movie feels like you're in this very pristine museum world.
To add to that point, it's like you're walking through this to go with your word, a museum, and then you're finding out the museum is kind of an emotional wreck behind the stage. Like everyone's acting, everyone's out front saying everything's fine, like everything's normal, everything's fine. Yeah.
So if anything, Licorice Pizza is probably one of his least dark movies, if that makes any sense. A lot of the other movies that we mentioned of his, he has like much more flawed characters, and there's a lot of like worse things that are happening. But in this one, there's like an innocence to it that I enjoy.
Flawed innocence, like every kid experiences, both at 25 and at 15.
Yeah, where the characters are a bit bright-eyed, but it's not like they have their world totally shattered. They just learn more subtle life lessons as they come into themselves. And like the Gary character, I really enjoyed how he puts on that bravado, but he does have those moments of insecurity, like when he calls Alana, but he doesn't say anything, and he hangs up, and then she calls back. That was a really nice vulnerable moment for him, where he like knows that in order for him to be successful in either acting or business, he has to be that very confident person, but it's not something that he could apply to everything in his life.
He responded as I think every 15-year-old whose younger brother has been threatened, every 15-year-old with a waterbed business whose younger brother has just been threatened by John Peters, is that he ruined his house, at least his bedroom. Can we like that? Whether you agree with it or not, whether John Peters, who of course we can admit is crazy, but this is fictionalized, they're friends, like Paul Thomas Anderson got his approval, like, hey, I'm writing a character based on you. And John is like, John said I would never threaten the kid, but I would hit on the girl.
Okay,
That's what John said.
fair enough. Because that was it was similar to the Sean Penn character, where it's like, whoa, here's another crazy guy. This guy is nuts. Right off the bat, he's going on a rant. He's threatening. He's narcissistic. He only wants to hear himself talk, and he goes off the rails, and he's totally unhinged. So that's what I find so interesting.
That's a funny story.
Yeah.
Funny story about like just because sometime last year I watched The Towering Inferno, and I do think the more I've gone through like a little bit of film history watching old films, William Holden has been very lucky to star in some of the best movies like Sunset Boulevard, Bridge on the River Kwai. And then I was reading the behind the scenes of The Towering Inferno, which has Paul Newman and Steve McQueen. And they both kind of went back and forth, kind of almost the same way Disney and Warner Brothers went back and forth on Bugs and Mickey in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like they both wanted to be the lead. And then William Holden, who is kind of a very much older actor at that time, comes in and goes, I'm the lead. And it's like, no, like, come on. It's like he had that ego about him. And he also was, according to my mom, so go after her. But like all those actors at the time, he was a bit of a drinker.
Sure. I mean, I feel like that's a tale as old as time in Hollywood.
I'm cooler than you. Don't forget it.
I don't need you to tell me whether I'm cool or not, old lady.
What was that?
I said,
What was that
milady.
then?
I said, milady.
What was
My
that?
lady. I don't need you to tell me whether I'm cool or not.
You're not cool, and your breath smells.
So, because looking at this particular era of films or of Hollywood, early 70s, early to mid 70s, right, 73. I think Gary has a moment where he says, "Oh, there's so much nudity in films now," and I think that's interesting. I think that was, when you look back, and you could probably speak to that more than me because you did your deep dive of films throughout the eras. And yeah, I mean, from what I know, there were a lot of more like X-rated movies coming out at the time.
Deep Throat.
And right. And this is like a couple years before, say, Spielberg really becomes famous with Jaws, and 4 years before Star Wars ushers in a whole era of blockbuster movies. And so this is like an interesting sort of Wild West time in Hollywood where things are getting more risque, and directors have maybe a little more power in the studio to be more explicit, sexually, with violence. And it's an interesting commentary there, very brief and subtle, but I was like, yeah, I get that. I get why maybe this Gary character would maybe be a little unsatisfied with the state of films in that time.
I mean, I think that's what's great about Paul Thomas Anderson movies. Is on my second rewatch, I saw it as, this is the girl I'm going to marry one day. I do not want her showing her breasts. This is my future girlfriend. This is like, I don't want her like being naked on screen. He's being he's being a little boy about it. I kind of saw it as like a misguided protectiveness. Maybe.
Right. But he doesn't mind, though, her parading around in a bikini in that waterbed store, which that was like one moment I was a little confused. They're having this party in the waterbed store, and everyone there looks like they're teenagers. Right. I think that was maybe one moment where I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on? Is this the opening of a business, or is this an orgy for high schoolers?
Oh, well, I mean, he is a teenager. So like if Ryan Tomczyk, shout out to you, Ryan. If Ryan Tomczyk opened up a guitar store when he was 15, because I know you went to high school with him, don't tell me that opening night would be pretty cool.
Yeah, if my friend who is a musician did that, not to be like too exclusive to people who are not in our friendship group. But yeah, I get it. It's like a teenager who has that space available to him, we might exploit it that way. And plus, they're water beds. I mean, the whole point of water beds, I imagine, they sold themselves on, oh, it's good for your back. But I imagine it's like the rotating bed sort of thing. It's meant to be some sort of enhancement to sex.
I think that's just insult, or like rubbing the salt in Alana's wound of like, you are 25. What are you doing walking around in a bikini? Like, what are you doing, girl? Like, you are also a partner, and you're getting jealous. She gets jealous when Gary starts flirting with a girl. She is a mess. And
But she's upset. She's getting upset also that she is jealous. Like, she's jealous, and on top of
Yes.
that, she's bothered by the fact that she's jealous because she does not want to have feelings for him, and she's in denial about that. But in that moment, she cannot deny her feelings.
And there's something
And-
so human about that.
Also, another key scene too is when they're trying to film some promotional video for that mayoral candidate, and then they really get to
yeah.
the big argument where then they won't talk to each other for a while. In that moment too, she is projecting her anger at herself onto him, and I feel like that's also like a very human thing, is that she's so afraid of her feelings for him that she's going to push him away and really cut deep into his feelings, so that way like he runs off, and of course she like regrets it right away as soon as she realizes how his response is. But that's the thing, like she's maybe like just as immature as he is, so she has no reason
very
to
much.
But besides the fact that she is like literally older, she has no reason to take any high ground in terms of emotional maturity.
And that's the thing about Paul Thomas Anderson movies. You can write essays about them. Literally, like you could like I imagine many a school film class have watched Thomas Anderson movies, and you can write, and it's probably fun to write like a thesis paper on this young love in the San Fernando Valley. No, it's just to the 65 to the people that really didn't care for this film, I'm going to ask you one thing. I'm going to make a bet, and I'm going to ask you. I bet this film sticks with you more. In your head, you're thinking about it in some way, shape, or form. You're not dusting it off as like a mediocre film that you saw like on a Friday night. I think this film tends to stick with people more, and you end up thinking about it. You end up thinking like, why was she, even when you disagree with the character's decision, you end up just, it sticks with you longer than most films.
I agree. I think it's the kind of movie that takes a little time to digest, maybe sleep on it. Right? If you see, I saw it at night and I had all these thoughts about it, and my initial impression was I liked it, but I couldn't really totally process a coherent opinion about it until the next day, where I could really where everything that happened could really sink in.
Formulate everything.
Right. It is a bit of a long movie. There is a lot that happens here and there. But I think the movie also does a good job at the end of reminding us of that journey that they have. Just like the little quick snippets of them running for each other at different points in the movie as they are running towards themselves, literally at the end. So, I think it's a thinker.
Yeah.
And maybe if your initial reaction is, I don't know what to think of this, like, give it time. It might warm up on you, or it might deserve a second viewing. I don't know if it's like a super rewatchable movie that you go back to all the time. I feel like a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson movies are ones that you go back to every now and then. They're not like super rewatchable, which is not a criticism. I'm just saying, like, how
It's
often
a mood.
are you gonna
It's a mood.
How often are you gonna watch There Will Be Blood?
When you're in the mood, like I'm trying to think of like a wine or something, but it's or an album. Actually, it's like and with Paul Thomas Anderson, he now has 9 albums, and some are like, I always go back to Boogie Nights, but I'm gonna actually attempt to watch There Will Be Blood sometime in the future, and it's probably been a very long time. But last point. Oh, last point. Did you catch John C. Reilly?
Yes, as Herman
Okay.
Munster.
Yes. Okay. To anyone,
Well-
like, that is also a better on second viewing.
Specifically as the actor who played Herman Munster, Ed Gwynn, was that his name?
Fred
Fred
Gwynn.
Gwynn, and then playing Herman Munster. So that was a funny little bit. His voice is a bit too recognizable for me
Yes.
to not catch that. It's like, wait a second. I actually did rewind. And I'm like, oh, that is him. I thought that was funny. And I think it's cool too that there are a lot of cameos in this. I think it speaks to the power of maybe Paul Thomas Anderson's status in Hollywood, that when he has a project going, that he is able to get a lot of recognizable actors to just be in, like, you know, maybe a small part here or there, just to be in it somehow. He
Seems
has
like an
that
honor.
pull. I think he is I get a sense that he's very well respected in the Hollywood community there. And also, I'll just say too, that I really appreciate that he's always putting out original work. You know, these are original stories, and in this day and age, it's pretty hard to find new releases of something that isn't a remake or a sequel or based on something else or in some way part of an already existing franchise. So always refreshing to get completely new content.
And the last bit about him, it's every time he's always one director that I always love listening to talk about filmmaking, because he seems like a regular, like, he's not like, I only watch art films. He's like, I have 4 kids. We love Marvel in this house. He has really good opinions on filmmaking. Whenever someone asks a filmmaker about Marvel movies and what they're doing to the industry, he always his opinions are, to me, highly valued, because he might do it. He would make an interesting superhero film. The man loves Adam Sandler films. The man loves comedy. The man likes to make certain movies his way. The man has a vision, but I'm just very happy for his success, and he just seems like a regular guy who has worked his way up to it.
Yeah, yeah, we've been gushing over him this whole episode. But yeah, I mean, it's because there's a lot of respect there for, you know, he just has these ideas for these stories and he makes them. And it's like with the Marvel thing, it's, yeah, all these big directors have their opinions, but it's not like those movies stop him from doing what he's doing.
So this is what I want to say to you. Do you know who I am?
Yeah.
Do you know who my girlfriend is?
Barbra Streisand?
Barbra Streisand.
Sand.
Sand, yeah, like sands, like the ocean, like
Barbra
beaches.
Streisand?
No, like Streisand.
Sand.
Streisand.
Streisand.
Barbra Streisand.
Barbra Streisand.
So yeah, I guess we can now move on to our percentage scores. I imagine they'll be very positive, but let's find out for sure. So, Keith, what is your percentage score for Licorice Pizza?
Call me biased, but I know this film is going to get better every time I watch it, but I absolutely loved it. I found it charming. I would put it in my top 10 favorite films of 2021, and for that, I give it a 92.
Oh, very nice. Just 1 point above the critic
I know, I'm
score.
giving it an A. I think a 91's a B+. At least it was in my school.
91's an A minus and 92 is an A. How about that?
That only B+ people say that.
I don't know what school you went to, but 90 and above are A's. So I don't know what curve you
We
were-
had to
you were-
work harder for our A's.
Well, la-di-da. Bully for you.
La-di-da. Good times had by all.
Okay. Yeah, I again, the more I think about this movie, the more I like it. I think I was almost not like at a loss, but I liked it fine at first, and then the more I ponder it, the more it goes up. But I think right now I would give it an 85%. So what does that round us up to?
An 88.5.
88.5%. See, that is a B plus.
I can't argue with that.
Okay, so it is official. On Licorice Pizza, we are siding with the critics. So by the time this episode is released, we'll have found out how many awards Licorice Pizza will have won. I know it is up for of many other awards. It's like one of those movies that's pretty much up for everything. But I know it's also up for Best Screenplay. So
that's the one where it has the best chance to win. And apparently, according to Johnny, it's not worth the bet because I do think Kenneth Branagh might also win. But I guess this, listening to this conversation, I'm kind of eating my words here. Whatever happens, but I hope Paul Thomas Anderson finally wins his Oscar.
Okay, yeah, he's never won before. I guess he's been nominated a bunch of times.
He's he's been nominated, but he's never won. People have won under him, like what's his Daniel Plainview, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Oh yeah, he's won. Yeah. People from his work have won awards. Yeah.
Yes,
that makes a lot of sense. Oh, so yeah, we'll see, and we'll catch you guys after the awards. Maybe we'll mend this conversation as like a little bonus, and talk about that. But until then, guys, thanks for listening, and join us again for more episodes soon.